Okay, so I want to look at print formatting. So it's an important thing that we're going to probably use a lot. It helps us print things easier. So I know it's in the PowerPoint, but I thought I'd go over it real quick just so everyone is at least exposed to it. Something I would have done in class, probably not this week, but last week. So the syntax is same as a print statement, print line or print, but we're going to add this printf for format. And you're going to put in a formatted string followed by whatever the parameters that get inserted into that string are. So easiest thing is just to look at an example or two. I'll set up with a string with my name, John, a variable set string name equal John, and then system.out.printf, quote, your name is %s for string, period. That's the formatted string, and the parameter that I'm going to replace the %s with is the variable name, and that would print your name is John. Maybe I want to print with a new line character at the end, so I'd add in a \n. Another example. This is where how does that example save us? We don't have to do the plus and a single string and then add my name in and then another string for the period at the end of the sentence. I can just put it all within one set of quotes. It's a formatted string and then have the variable name after. Another advantage is you can have multiple variables inserted into a string. So for example, I have a name 2, bow, and I print f, %string and %string are playing tennis, and then finish it with name 1, or just name and name 2. And again, I might add in a \n to have that take an entire line. The output would be John and Bow are playing tennis. I went ahead and copied this table. It's in our book. This is just some of the format specifiers. So %d will be an integer, %8d would be an integer in an 8-space field, and it would be aligned to the right. If you had a -6, you would have a left-aligned integer in a 6-space wide field. F are for floating point numbers. You can go through the rest of that. That'll help when you want to use it, which format specifier to use. So a quick example, if I have the number 18 stored in num, and then I were to print f %4d, the output would be space, and then the 18. So the dashes here are representing spaces. In other words, it would take up 4 spaces. So how could this be useful? Let's just do a quick example. Write code to create a multiplication table, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, ... up to 20 on the first row, and 10, 20, 30, 40, ... up to 100 on the last row. So in this example, we're going to use nested loops to create the table, and then string formatting so that everything shows up nicely in a row or a column, so everything's aligned nicely. Okay, so and why do we need to do that? Well, if you look at multiples of 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, it's not till you get to the 5th one that you need 2 spaces. But if you looked at multiples of, say, 9, 9, 18, the second number needs more spaces. So if we want the spacing to sort of be better, we would use the print formatting to get it to space right. So here we're going to use a nested loop to create the table. I'm just doing a little pseudocode here, and I'll go over to Eclipse in a second. The rows are going to go from 1 to 10, and the columns are going to go from 1 to 10. And the number that's printing in each space is the row times the column. So as you're in row 1, I guess it's starting at I guess we could start at 1. So maybe, we're starting at 2 to 10. So for the rows are going to go from 2 to 10. The columns are going to go from 1 to 10. And then the first number will be 2 times 1. The second one is 2 times 2, 2 times 3, 2 times 4. And that'll print all the way across. And then we'll print those. And then after we've printed our 10 columns, we need to get to the next line. Okay, so I'll jump over to Eclipse. And again, you can feel free to pause if you want to write that down. This presentation on the notebook here would be stuff I'd be putting on the board generally. And then when I switch over to Eclipse, the stuff I expect that you would then be coding along with me. Okay, so as I go into Eclipse, I don't know how you can change the size of the video so you could code along with me. Okay, so I'm going to call this multiplication table. I'm putting it in chapter 4. Technically, that's where the print formatting is. Go ahead and establish it. Let's go ahead and comment at the top so I can have a date. I'm going to create a multiplication table using nested loops and print formatting. And maybe I just call a method output table, and I send it how many rows do I want and how many columns do I want. So how many rows do we want? We want 9 rows, and we want 10 columns. 2 through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2 through 10 is 9 rows. 1 each has 10 multiples. The reason I want to set up a method there is maybe I could change it a little bit. I could change the number of rows or the number of columns. Okay, so we'll go in here, public, static, void, output table, taking in an integer with the maximum row, an integer for the maximum column. And then we're going to run a loop for I, integer I equals 2. I goes up to and including the max row, and increases by 1. What we'll be doing here, we're going to have a nested loop. So now for integer j, let's go back to our pseudocode for a second. I goes from 2 to 10, so 2 to max row. J goes from 1 to 10, so 1 to max column. I guess I could call this up here row. Maybe that makes more sense. That's why I chose max row and max column upstairs, so that I could use row and column here. Column's going to start at 1. Column's going to go up to and include the max column. And column will increase by 1. Okay, so for each row and each column, we then need to print the product of the two. So let me go ahead and give that guy a name first. Product equals row times column. Now we'll do system.out. F. And let's see, so I want to print an integer with, let's give it 3 spaces. Put that in quotes. And then the argument or the parameter is the product. So after my columns all print, I then need to print an empty line. Before I go to the next row. So feel free to pause and type that in. Let's run it. Got an error. Let's see what's my error. Ah, I know what it is. I didn't put the D on the formatter. Okay, so you can kind of see it's not quite what I wanted. It doesn't go up to 10. And notice they're not really all aligned either. So why not? It doesn't go up to 10 because I need to change that to a 10. And then maybe if I make this a little bit bigger, let's make it a 5 and see what happens. So what's happening is those numbers are aligning to the right, and this is causing my table to move around a little bit. So if I make them align to the left, negative 5D, well, still looks a little funky, doesn't it? But trying to figure out if we can fix that or not. Do we need more spaces? Oh, you know what? I think it's just my output. For some reason, my console, the spacing is messed up. If I copy this and I paste it into a text document, it's all lined up. So it's just my console creating different spaces. This worked fine. Everything is lined up. It would have also worked fine if I had just used positive 5. This is why I had such a hard time grading the tower, because my console doesn't look right for some reason. I'm not sure why. But there's my right aligned, which is what I was working with for the first time. So that is what we wanted. So how can I modify this code to talk about sort of make it more robust? So we could look at the pre and post conditions of this method output table. So up here, what's the precondition of this method? Precondition is that the maximum row and max column, well, that max row is greater than or equal to 2. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any rows to print. And that max column is greater than or equal to 1, or just greater than 0. Both integers. We don't really need to say they're integers because their type is integer, but I will there. And then what's the post condition? What does this method leave us with? It should leave us with a table, multiplication table from, well, you know what? I think we should just start at 1. From 1 to max column and 1, 2, and max row. So from 1 up to 1 times max column down to max row to max row. And you just describe the output. Max row times max column. That would be providing the pre and post conditions of this method. So I said I wanted to start it at 1. Let's go back and start it at 1, see what that looks like. Should just have 1 through 10 in the first row. Again, I'll copy it and put it back into my notepad so you can see it better. That's nice. And now I want to modify this program so that the default is 10 by 10, and that's a new function. So let's have a new function called output table. We're going to overload it. With no parameters. Default values. So there's no preconditions for this function. Are there post conditions? Yes. Should output a 10 by 10 multiplication table. How do we do it? Well, there's very little code involved. We want to call ourselves, but this time send it to parameters 10 and 10. And then back in main, instead of calling output table and sending 10 and 10, I can just call the default output table. Now we run it. Should still work, and it does. I'm not going to bother copying and pasting, but I also have the ability now to change this, say, to a 5 by 5 table. And that'll print out 5 by 5 table. Or I could make it 25 by 12. Run it again. And then I would need to be a little bit careful because I have given myself 5 spaces. And so I'm still good. I still have enough space in here. If I picked too large of numbers, I might have to, maybe that's another precondition in my thing here, is that now that I can change the max row is now greater than or equal to 1. We might need to say in here, another precondition is that numbers, products all smaller than, are all products are all less than, so max row times max column, that's the largest product. That would need to be less than something that is 5 spaces, so 10,000.
The sun is the star.
Because as soon as that got to be 10,000, that would take up 5 spaces. And so as long as that one is smaller than 10,000, everything else will be smaller than 10,000. And that essentially would be another precondition for this method. Okay, so that's print formatting. I was mainly just showing us the print formatting, but I am incorporating within that, looking at preconditions and post conditions. They're in chapter 4, we can start putting them in. And then I like showing us this overloading where we have sort of a method that's complicated, and then we overload it with a default method. So I'm going to run that again with the default. It's kind of a good practice to get into. We'll be using it more as we go forward. Copy that out of there, paste it back into here, and this is nice because it's not only did I do the 10 by 10, but this is so much more flexible the way we expanded this. And I really I didn't do much to expand it. That's how come I set up these parameters and why I set it up as a method to begin with. Okay, and let's see. So by adding in these comments, made it a little harder to see the whole code, but there it all is. It all fits in there. And I'll stop the video. You're welcome to pause if you need to hang on to it. I'll also post both the video and the code online.